Hey friends, Tiffany Dawn here, and today I want to talk about the idea of praying for your future husband. This is something that quite a few of you have asked about, and I also see a lot of videos from other YouTubers about it, and I just want to share a different perspective. 3 things that I think are really good about praying for a future husband, but also 3 words of caution. So you can kind of ask yourself, like, is this a good thing for me to be doing all the time right now? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So let's talk about that. So the good things. Number 1, talking to God about anything and everything on your mind is amazing because that builds intimacy with God. So praying for your future husband falls into that category. Like sharing that with God builds intimacy with him, and that's a good thing. So thing number 2 is that prayer can help us surrender. So sometimes we get so worried about the future or so like caught up in like, I just want to be married or I just want to be in another season of life, and praying about it can help us surrender that to God. And thing number 3 is that praying for your future and God to be at work in it is a beautiful thing. Not just about your future husband, but anything. Just like giving your future to God when it comes to mind, I think that's beautiful. So those are the really good parts of praying for your future husband. Now let's talk about a word of caution, or some parts that could actually, I think, maybe even do some damage. I don't know if that's too strong of a statement. Number 1, it's easy to think that marriage is the epitome of life, especially as someone who grew up in church. I felt like marriage was kind of elevated, like you're just waiting to get married. Like my whole single years, I thought about getting married all the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like for some of us, that's just a dream we've had in our hearts since we were young, and that's totally fine and normal and good. But I think sometimes it can almost be like this sense of pressure or this sense of like, I'm living my whole life building up to marriage. And marriage is a beautiful thing and it is a gift, but it is not the epitome of life. And so if you're always praying for your future husband, it can kind of play into that idea that marriage is the end goal. And marriage is not the end goal. The end goal is a relationship with God and living in relationship with Him through all seasons of life. Number 2 is constantly praying for the future can tempt us to live in the future in our minds rather than embracing the present moment where God has us right now. So I didn't get married until 4 days before my 29th birthday. And I'd always dreamed of being married. I'd actually dreamed since I was a kid of like growing up, I've told you this before, but like growing up, getting married by 20 and being martyred as a missionary by like 21. That was like my dream as a child. Yes, I was very weird, very strange child. But because of that, I spent many times over the years praying for my future husband. Just like, God, please provide him. God, when am I gonna get married? I was like 16 and freaking out like, oh my gosh, I haven't met anybody yet. Like, when am I gonna get married? A lot of people in my church got married like in their teens, like really young. And so I was like, all this pressure, like, oh my gosh. And I'd pray about it a lot. And not that that was a bad thing, but I think sometimes it distracted me from living in the season that God had me in. It distracted me from taking those beautiful teen years to like discover myself and develop deep friendships with people. And if I kept constantly praying for my future husband, that was where my mind was. That's what I was thinking about. That's what I was dwelling on. And I was kind of living in the future and not living in the moment I was given right then. And thing number 3 is sometimes if we're always praying for a future husband, I think that kind of stir up discontentment and loneliness in our hearts. And it can also do with like the frequency, like how much, how often you're praying for your future husband. If you're always thinking about him, I think that can actually lead to a sense of discontent with where you are and a sense of loneliness. And so if like for Natalie, when she grows older, when she's in her teens, I'm not going to encourage her to pray for her future husband. Like if it's something that's on her mind, definitely like build intimacy with God. But I don't want her focused on that, honestly. Like in their teens, like there's so much to learn, there's so much to experience, and I don't want her to miss that, you know? And like as she gets older and as she's getting to a season where she's like, you know, I'd really like to get married, that's more of the time when I might say, yeah, like talk to God about that, ask Him to have His hand over that, to guide you, but don't let it become something that's where your mind is always going, and don't lose sight of your now. Don't forget that your God sees you, every desire in your heart, every longing in your heart. He sees it all and He knows you and He fully loves you. So I love you girls today, and let's go to Natalie updates.
This week's update is that Natalie is obsessed with eating everything in sight. She has officially become a baby and wants to put everything in her mouth, which is hilarious and cute.